years. We've heard so much about the fact that France are under strength, well under strength, and we're going to hear more about that shortly. So what are we right to expect from the All Blacks over these 3 test matches?
I always get nervous because I always just think back to, and I don't know why it comes to mind, but I think it was Great Britain or England sent a perceived B team over to play the Silver Ferns, and there was like all this hype as how it was disrespectful, and you know, a lot of that media attention, and players were sort of doing interviews saying, and then they lost that first test. So like it's very dodgy ground. And the one thing I'd say with the French is, because of the length of their season, the amount of teams they have, like actually building depth and players that have the ability to make that step up, you've just got to look at the final on the weekend to see the quality and the competitiveness of the top 14. And they've done it over a number of years. Like, yes, there's a number of, guys that aren't capped or haven't had test matches, but they have probably been in and around the squad and understand the systems and processes. So, and I think sometimes youth and enthusiasm is great for a side, but also how freeing as a young player, like there's no expectation on you to go out there and beat the All Blacks, so throw the ball around. And if there's 1 or 2 sides in World Rugby that make you nervous when you hear that, it's probably Argentina and the French. I think we've got to be very cautious that we don't expect it to be all our way, but also we don't want to go into our shells either. Like, we want to play our style of rugby and definitely hit the ground running and make a statement.
And what other things do you think they need to work on? When you think about the games that they lost last year, they were all winnable matches. The margins were pretty tight. So what do they need to do? What are you looking to see from them this year that turns those narrow defeats into wins?
Look, I think for all viewers, we've talked around, not just us, but a lot of people in New Zealand, they want to see a free-flowing rugby. So being able to attack with the ball in hand. And I think, Razor's used some terminology around playing at speed. So, we'd like to think that they want to maybe hold on to the ball a little bit more and being able to, ask questions, then go into the kicking game. Now, look, depending on conditions and, how the game is going, have its highlights, but you've got to be able to use a contestable game and kicking long or to be able to build pressure. But I'd love to see a bit more speed. So you think around the collision area, around the breakdown, they've selected the midfielders of Quintapaya and Tavatavanawa, which you'd hope to be able to get over the advantage line. They've got a great loose forward trio and some big ball carriers. We talked about with Jace Ryan around Tossi and Tamaiti Williams, who is injured now, but those big ball carriers with our props. So hopefully that's an area that I'd like to see. But then I think more so, Scotty Hanson actually touched on adjustments. So what does that actually look like? So I'd like to think that means adjusting on the run. So we might feel that we want to play, a high passes and hold on to the ball for a long period of time. But if we're not getting there right for whatever reason, let's go to another part of the game. So those are probably the 2 areas that I'm thinking too. Jib, you might feel a bit different, but it's something that I'm looking forward to seeing.
I think the biggest thing is finishing. So a couple of things if you look at is they created so many, as you say, they could have been one, and it was just that last pass or being a little bit more patient not to throw the offload if there was a lot of traffic. And you've heard the coaches come out and identify that, so you know that they'll be focusing on making sure that, okay, we get into that 22, we want to come away with at least 3 or 7 points or 5 if they miss the conversion. The other is either side of half-time. There were moments where there was a fixation on, I suppose, substitutions and maybe not getting the impact and their flow or momentum of games dipped. I think they got over that towards the end of year tour, but then probably didn't finish that last 20. So just making sure that they take the game in clumps and almost reset to go again, rather than probably watching the scoreboard or in terms of the time. And then lastly, I think just that balance, the kick strategy, and where the kick strategy comes into it is underneath the roof. I think, when the Highlanders were successful, Aaron Smith did a lot of kicking, and making sure they play in the right parts of the field will be crucial. And it also gives the French that if they are given the licence to run, well, you run and you take that risk versus reward, and hopefully that defensive pressure can get on. Then just that's all the attack. But I think more importantly, probably for the defence, where they had penalties in clumps. They actually weren't highly penalised side, but when they were penalised, it was in clumps. And if you use South Africa as an example, just gave them an ability to piggyback and grasp that momentum back.